to 3. Thank you, Gavin. We're now recording, and please have your cell phones perhaps on silent or whatever way you wish to have them so they don't disturb us. Would be appreciated. Before the sort of my opening comments, we'll have an opening karakia, and our new independent member is kindly offered. Annalisa.
Turia ki runga, turia ki raro, turia ki roto, turia ki waro, turia tato te tangata, ki te kaupapa o te hui ne, ki te kaupapa o te rangi nai, Māori ora ki toto katoa.
Thank you. Just wanted to, in opening remarks, remember Mark Maloney, who many of us will have had some dealings with, who sadly passed away with his family over in Queensland unexpectedly. He was not well, but it had taken 3 months to address his health, and the family part of that was spending time over there and relaxing in the sun and etc. So we have already, with Leonie, approached her when I found that out, and we've sent a letter already to the OAG to be passed on to the family. I've dealt with Mark a fair bit over a long time, and he was certainly very pragmatic in trying to do really good stuff for the area, and was certainly trying to cut through some of the issues that we have been experiencing. Was very positive, and I've found that on other councils also. So just to recognise that, Laura Cannon is stepping in as an acting Assistant Auditor General in our sector. So we've had dealings with Laura also in the past, so she's well known to us. Other housekeeping matters, we are being recorded. Zoom requirements there that this recording will be available on the council's YouTube channel in due course. Microphones, please keep them muted and they're speaking, and sort of give me a wave if you've got a particular comment that you want to raise. If so just keep your camera and microphone off unless you're required to be speaking. Flight safety briefing, if you like. The locations of the exits are through the doors over here or out through on the outside. We've got toilets through the doors now left. Anyone that doesn't know it, and that's more likely to be independents like myself that'll need help there. I think everyone else in the room is staff or councillors. Online for part of the meeting to be aware of that, and they're entitled to be here, subject to us not being in public excluded. So I don't think there's any changes in the order of items, and I believe there are no apologies. Is that correct, Gavin? Thank you.
Sorry. Apology from Deputy Mayor Bryant. Thank you.
I'd like to move from the chair that apology be accepted, and that Deputy Mayor Bryant be given leave of absence for this particular meeting. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Butler. Thank you. Any comment? I'll put the motion. All those in favour say aye.
Aye.
Against, if any? Carried. Declarations of interest. Is there any declaration of interest on any of the items in the agenda? Thank you. None noted. Moving on to page. Apologies, I should have had that open at the right page. No, the minutes. They were separately circulated. Is there any issues arising from those minutes, or any matters of clarification or factual accuracy that any members wish to raise? There being none, that the minutes of the Audit and Risk Committee meeting held on Wednesday, 3 October 2024 be confirmed as a true and correct record of the meeting. Do I have a mover? Thank you, Councillor McKenzie. Seconder? Councillor Butler? You weren't present. Thank you, Councillor Walker. All those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. We also have confidential minutes from the Audit and Risk Committee on the same date that have been circulated to those councillors that are present. I'll take those as read, unless anyone's got any factual items which to raise at this time. If not, can I have a mover for those? Councillor Walker, are you happy to move in that direction? And Elisa, you happy to second? No. Okay, yes. Councillor McKenzie. You'll second there. Any discussion? There being none, all those in favour? Against, if any? Carried. Right, into the agenda properly. We've got item 6.1, September quarterly financial results. Matt, and Micah, you're going to come and to the table and join us. Thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, this is a report, start again. We took a report to Council on the 7th of November about our September year-to-date financial results. So in terms of keeping Audit and Risk in the loop in terms of all things financial, we've now bringing that paper to the Audit and Risk Committee, so you're aware of the financial situation. This paper essentially touches on what we are doing as a result of being in that financial situation. That work has been occurring over the last couple of months and continues to occur to the extent that we had a workshop with Council yesterday that was looking at not only this financial year, 2024-25, but indeed the next two annual plan years. So a lot of the impacts this year need to be factored into the annual plans as they approach. So it gets us through to the next long-term plan, if you like. So there is a lot of work happening. Essentially, finance has now been around, well, finance, strategy, policy, and the group managers have now been around and talked to all but a couple of budget managers with a focus on how to address this problem that we've got. I'll leave it there. Happy to take questions, but Mike, over to you if you're wanting to add a little bit more to what I've started with.
Through Mr. Chair. This is a difficult position to be in. Council's financial circumstances are not the same as we envisaged when we adopted the LTP back in June of this year. Having said that, at the time we adopted a fairly financial strategy that assumed we would be in a much better situation in terms of external matters affecting Council. So we have seen cost increases, additional charges from central government, well above those that we envisaged when we put the assumptions together for the long-term plan. The long-term plan itself was delivered within a very tight fiscal envelope. So limits on rates rises, limits on debt. In order to achieve that, we ran very tight budgets, and we assumed that if anything happened, we have an adverse weather event, we would use borrowing to address that, rather than the approach we'd taken in previous years where we had adequate reserves available. So Council was not left in the position where it had the financial resilience it had had in previous years. So that puts us in a difficult situation in terms of addressing the budget shortfalls we will have this year. And as Matt has said, the managers are working really hard on how do we close the gap. But we haven't had the, shall we say, the ability to defer and do other works that we've had in previous years because we've already taken that out for the LTP. So a robust and ongoing conversation will be had with managers and also with councillors about what this means in terms of those core costs that have gone up that need to be reflected in next year's annual plan, and what that means for both rates and debt. That is an ongoing conversation. Some numbers will be collected from managers by the end of next week, and we hope to be reporting back to council, or in fact we will be reporting back to councillors in February, to both forecast the year-end position that we are now anticipating for this financial year, but also to frame the conversation for the annual plan and what trade-offs may be necessary in order to sit within the preferred fiscal envelope. Happy to take any questions.
Sorry, any comments from councillors and questions? And from, of course, our other independent. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you. It did just occur to me when I was reading the, 2-page whatever cover sheet to the report that had already gone to council on the quarterly results, that in the context of our workshop yesterday, whether it might not, the CE might want to consider just sending that report to all councillors, because what it does on this report is it just re-emphasises the work that you're doing across the leadership team and within council. Anyway, just a thought.
And Lisa.
Thank you. Yeah, firstly, thanks to the finance team. You've been through quite a journey. We had the long-term plan, and now, and obviously reading this paper, there's now another chapter in there. So I guess well done on not putting the paper together, but all the mahi behind it, where you are looking for those cost savings. So I no doubt that is a huge amount of work that we're going through. But it's almost about, you can only squeeze so much out of a lemon. So you're kind of doing all that work. So I guess my high-level question is, when are we going to have another conversation about trade-offs, and I guess our appetite about the fiscal envelope? Because I get, what's the timeline on that when, we're going to have to come back to the table and make decisions?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, you're right. Look, but for time yesterday, there was going to be a first conversation about parks and reserves and trade-offs. Unfortunately, we ran out of time and didn't get there. But that particular area has a known pressure around the contract renewal. So they'd already done a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last few weeks. So certainly in February, we're expecting to, run the model, know exactly what the financial situation is. Alongside, though, that we're capturing a whole lot of information as we have these meetings with people. That will lead us to be able to have a conversation, workshops with councillors about what we could do to alleviate it. Obviously, there's a 7% at the moment. They could choose to go higher, or they could choose to stay the same. What that will probably mean, or almost definitely mean, is a conversation about levels of service. So when we talk about doing X and Y to save money, they'll be made very aware of what that actually means to the community, I suppose, in terms of having litter bins in the main street of Richmond or whatever it might be. We're pushing out the actual, because of the level of change, we're expecting to need to consult on the annual plan. So we've pushed that out as far as we can in order to do the work that we're currently doing. Obviously, the decisions we're taking are not straightforward or easy. So we're wanting in one breath to build as much time as we can in and push the consultation out. But equally, there might be some things that are more long-term, if you like, and that we won't be able to necessarily address and get agreement on a way forward as part of this annual plan cycle. So it's a short-term, medium and long-term sort of focus. So certainly at the appropriate times, they'll feed into the annual plan, or the next year of the annual plan, or indeed the next long-term plan that we contemplate.
Thank you. Any other comments from councillors, committee members? From my point of view, looking at this, we've got to bear in mind our responsibilities under Section 100, which refers to balanced budget, but we're actually now in the action plan side of this, and the need for us to keep a balanced budget cover running through. to me, looking at the report, some of these variances that are leading to this can be explained by phasing. So when we go back in February, I'd be encouraging staff to look at the understanding all the phasings and which one of these are perhaps a negative variance because the timing of the expense came ahead of perhaps what we had anticipated in the budget, so we can get rid of the noise around the edges. This obviously is going to put the wider team here it's going to put a lot of pressure on them. So we also need to be very cognizant of health and well-being and wellness of our team here, who have been working incredibly hard for the ratepayers of the region. We may have to get to the stage, as Matt alluded to, of considering levels of service. And there may be some stuff that we would like to be doing that's simply within the fiscal envelope that we're going to have to reconsider. Alternatively, going forward, we're going to have to make that decision. How does it get funded? What are our rate levels? And our larder is reasonably empty. As Mike pointed out, we've used all the reserves and that sort of thing. So we don't have any fat left to come and go on without taking some reasonably radical action. So I think this has actually probably moved from a risk to an issue in risk speak. And I'd like to certainly see the next committee meeting here getting an update on what's happening, because at the end of the day, a major risk that we have as a council is we lose the confidence of our community. And I can see substantial steps are being anticipated, and we need to be careful that we bring the community along with us. So anyway, our Chief Executive has got a couple of comments.
To the Chair, given this is an issue, and I agree, it is no longer a risk, it is actually something that's happening and we're managing it as an issue. And the next audit committee is not until March, I believe. I wondered whether we should convene this committee a bit, perhaps in February, before we go in a confidential session, before we go to the council with what the modelling looks like. I think we should use the collective, talent around the table to assist us and to also get across whether you believe in your minds that we are addressing some of those issues. I just put that to the committee.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Yeah, but it's something I raised yesterday also about, did have some discussion yesterday at our workshop, was about signals coming from the government about local government, and the local government conference was delivered a message about what councils are expected to do and basically restrict the scope of their service to the community. And also there have been signals from the government about removing the wellbeing, 4 wellbeings, which actually is something that at the moment we're required to provide for the wellbeings of the community. So I just think that's another element in all of this, and by February we may know more, may possibly have more of an idea about how that is going to affect our financial planning.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Any other comments? Leonie.
To the Chair, I'm just in response to Councillor Butler's comments around the 4 wellbeings. Look, I also look at the Local Government Act, and it's not actually that restrictive. There are some things we have to do, but if we felt it was important for us for the why we do things, we can still have parts of those 4 wellbeings within our strategic plan. So nothing prevents us from it. It's around the affordability, and that would be the question for me.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through you, Chair. Just want to overemphasise, I guess, what you've already said is the implications on our staff. So the impact on some of the meetings that we've already had to have, they haven't been pleasant. The radu in the room has got real, and accusations are flying, which is quite sad to see and hear and be a part of. So for this committee, I think it's really important that we understand the journey of what this is for all those that sit in the government's level and those who sit underneath them, particularly when FTEs continually to get bantered around in this room, which we can't control that corridor from certain people, but I'm mindful I left here with a very heavy heart and it wasn't aimed at me. So that this is an issue that we need to we can't sweep it under the mat, and that people's well-beings are being put out there in a negative way for some.
Thank you for that, Councillor Walker. And I think my heart was very heavy when I left yesterday too. Look, I think we should have more of a fuller conversation when we go into committee.
I'm very happy for that to occur, but what I was referring to is that our staff and team members are being asked to really examine stuff and do stuff which is outside and on top of their normal workloads, because this wasn't anticipated and they're still having to deliver. So this is adding stresses to everyone's workloads, and what you're saying coming out in comments is probably symptomatic of the stresses that everyone in this organisation, from the councillors down to all the staff, are experiencing. I think it's important also, I like the idea of coming back and having a look at the risks, so long as the Audit and Risk Committee understands its role is to be the canary in the coal mine, I often say, where to look at it and say, have you thought about these risks? What are the risks of development of this strategy? What's the risk of implementation? Have they all been thought through? It's not our role as a council of the committee to actually come up with the strategy, that's the role of the top table and at the actual council meetings, is to work through and develop it. Ours is to make sure that all the risks have been understood and we've got appropriate mitigations in place and everyone's thought about the implications thoroughly. So we're to put our sort of critical hat on. And I think that would add some value. Your suggestion, I'll leave it with the governance team to coordinate diaries for that. But I'd suggest sooner rather than later, given that we sort of end up all disappearing after Centre arrives for a few weeks while we have our traditional Christmas break. So if we could get something in the diary in the next 24 hours or so, I think that would be great, if possible. But I know you've got other things to do and the governance team and other meetings coordinate. Is there any other comment anyone wants to make on this? If not, we have a recommendation on the screen, which I won't read out again. Do I have someone happy to move in that direction? Annalisa? Councillor Butler for seconding. Thank you. We've got it moved and seconded. Any final comments? I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against, if any? No abstentions are noted. Thank you. Carried. Thank you, Mike and Matt. Audit Committee work plan.
Yes. So last meeting, we approved the terms of reference changes, and at that meeting we discussed how would we ensure that we were delivering to those terms of reference, and a work plan was suggested. I have drafted a work plan, which it is probably a little small font, and that's based on the terms of reference. I'm very keen to hear from the committee if this covers what you would expect to see, if there's anything missing, if there's any changes you would like.
Any comments from committee members? Annalisa?
That's also the way of making sure that it's so that the governance team don't trying to get more and more stuff into this country. But, yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Mackenzie.
Thank you through the chair. Yes, no, I agree with what's been raised and it looks good. My question though revolves around the line items in the last box under integrity and investigations. So how do we operate in order to understand what some specific one-off things that we might want to have in there? Can you explain to me how we are having those conversations with SLT across in order to come up with the fact that these are the things that we think might be keeping us awake at night?
Through the chair, so you're talking about things over and above the suggested thing, the things from because the list of things I've got here are from the terms of reference.
Oh, okay. So all the ones in the integrity and investigations.
Mm-hmm.
So, but from time to time, we would be wanting to do some one-off look at some specific things.
Yep, and if that's the case, for example, something was raised at this meeting, then you could request that we look into that, and we would do so and provide you with information.
Okay, so my question maybe is twofold, because there is something that I do want to raise, but in actual fact, I'm assuming how would you have those conversations with the leadership team to say, oh, well, we may need to do some one-off looks at something. What's keeping you awake at night?
So that's part of the risk process, I guess, is when we work with the managers to talk about the things that they see as the risk for their areas. And then we talk about what they're doing about them. And if, for example, it came up that they were doing some things, but they weren't sure if they were effective, then we might talk about how we could work out how we understand if they're effective or what else they can do. Given the scope of things we do, those conversations could be quite different depending on what was keeping them up at night.
Yeah.
But it's a conversation. Yeah.
Okay, so it would flow from that risk conversation maybe through into a piece of work. That's all good. The one thing I did want to raise. So the council lets contracts to third parties to run events in communities, deliver services, etc. And these contracts might involve events with youth. And so how do our systems and processes work to ensure that when we're involved in letting these contracts, we can be confident that police checks are done and that all of those health and safety things are covered by the person that we've let the contract to? How would I be assured that all those systems and processes are in place?
Through the chair, I can respond to this. So we have a process whereby a contractor signs a contract that they will meet certain conditions. Those conditions are what you were talking about. They give us a health and safety report of all the things that they do to give us, that's how we get our assurance, and they sign a contract to say that they will do that. That also, if there are children involved and it comes under the Child Protection Act, etc., then they, through signing that contract, they're giving us assurance that they do that.
How do we check that it's being done? I mean, someone can give an assurance that they're going to do it, but how do we check that it's being done?
It is generally we respond to, if someone raises a query, we would respond to that by going back to the contractor and say, we're reviewing your practice and what you do, and we would question them what practices they have in place And then if someone had come to us directly or perhaps through one of your councillors had raised an issue, we would respond to that. And so first of all, we would go back and make sure that they were aware of the conditions that they had agreed to in the contract. And then we would raise that we were aware that someone had raised a point. Maybe I think there's something in the wind at the moment where the member of the public wanted assurance that there were adequate supervision at an event, that sort of thing, based on the number of children. So we would follow that through by going back to the contractor, saying, according to your health and safety report, you agreed to have, say, so many adults per children, etc., at an event. So pursue it that way.
Okay, which is exactly what has happened, which is all good. But sitting back from it, I'm just thinking that maybe there should be more checks and balances along the way. But
okay, so how do we do that? Okay, so this goes into the health and safety space where we do random audits, and we would go and we would follow up with contractors and just arrive on site and do audits to be assured that they were practicing to what they had signed to.
Right, okay, but we don't have any random audits of that nature. And
this is a part of the practice that's coming.
Okay.
And that we're building up the infrastructure to be able to do that.
Councillor Butler.
Yes, thanks. I just wanted to, and the question is really where it would fit in here, but I want to raise the issue of the climate forum, which is, quite a broad, sorry to correct myself, it's the leadership group of the climate forum, which Tasman District Council has a membership of, as does Nelson City Council. And I think, we are trying to manage that risk, but the situation is that what are the risks? The risks, there are risks of our membership actually kind of implicating us or bringing us into activities that even though we might vote against them or not agree with them, that they may happen and that could implicate us. I mean, one of the things that has come up already is some sort of, protest action or something about the climate. And then the second thing is about the leadership group writing submissions, and we're already working on an arrangement whereby we are not party to those submissions. But I'll just be, it's just something to flag, that's all, that, we have noted that we feel a bit vulnerable, or the council is a bit vulnerable in that situation. But having said that, we also want to be part of it. So we have to come to some kind of structure or arrangement whereby we are minimising the risk, but at the same time, we are able to contribute.
Through the chair, that sounds like something that, in the context of this, it's probably part of the risks that we identify for the organisation. And I have been working with Barbara and Anna, and we've been talking about the risks that are emerging out of that sort of area. Not that specific risk that you're raising, but I'm happy to have a chat with them if you think that's appropriate, the appropriate people, and make sure that we're capturing those risks and understanding what's happening in that space. There's also scope within the risk management area of this agenda to review the risk management approach for different programs and projects outside of our organisational risk management approach as well.
Any other comments on the work plan? From my perspective, I think this is a really good step forward, that we've got structure to know as committee members everything's going to get covered off that we're required to cover off in their terms of reference. I have made the comment earlier today, it would be great against each of these points if we can get a reference to back to the terms of reference both ways. Very minor typographical change, I quite like cross references. It's probably the auditor in me coming back. But I think this is good progress. This is a live document. It's one that's going to end up in, I'd like to see it coming back at each meeting. So we're thinking about what we should be covering. It's there, we can do a cross check, we haven't missed anything, and we can add items as it comes up, because risk is dynamic and it's as a result of the environment we're working in. We have a recommendation on the board, on the whiteboard up here. Do I have a mover? And Councillor McKenzie, second, and Councillor Butler. Any further comment? There being none. All those in favour? Against, if any? And no abstentions are noted. Carried. Thank you. The next item on our agenda, excuse me, is Health, Safety and Wellbeing Report. Thank you.
Hello, I take the report as being read. Do you have any questions?
And I'll turn my talk button on. Yeah, maybe don't minute that as health and safety report as read from lessons learned. Never of all our reports in our entire pack, the health and safety report will never be taken as read. So even if you can just talk us through the highlights of your report, that would be great, so that we can minute that and then we can ask questions post that. Just even the highlights, just so that we can minute it.
Some of the key highlights are we've been a bit limited in resources, and we have hired a new health and safety advisor who's going to be coming in and incorporated into our team in January. And a part of that process will be the reimagining of health and safety, and part of that is the action plan that we have created to cover contractor management, as we just talked about previously, leadership, training, incident management, risk management. That's just to make sure that we're doing due diligence and that we're meeting our requirements, and that we can grow. And if there's any areas that we need to address, that we do that with confidence, and that we do that quickly. And we continue to do pre-qualification assessments on the contractors that are submitting questionnaires into the business, and it's a bit more robust. So it takes a little bit longer now. There's more questions being asked from myself as the team leader and the representative from the Council for Health and Safety, to ensure that we are getting the contractors to provide us with the information that does give us that assurance. And part of that coming out for the reimagining is doing the audits, which we're going to be planning going from Q3, beginning of next year. And we have already conducted some audits this year. Another area of risk management is looking at the current risk register capability that we have within our online health and safety system called Damstra. And what we're wanting to do is collate all the current risk registers that individual department working groups have, and ensuring that we have that in one centralised system. So that will mean that we can ensure that we're doing the annual reviews, and that we can put it into that system, which will give us reminders to actually do that. And also part of that is when we have an event that occurs, whether it's a near miss or an injury, we can actually go back to our risk register to make sure that we have incorporated those control measures into it, so that we can review and assess. So part of that process is to review the control measures that we have when we do have an event. The asbestos and location certificates, that's an area that we are ensuring that we are going to be covering and be compliant in there, to make sure that we're meeting our legal requirements. Part of that will also be looking at re-implementing asbestos management and location certificate meetings, to ensure that we're all aligned across the working groups that have responsibility, ensure that we're maintaining that with the incorporation and the support of health and safety. our reporting system, Dempster, we're also looking at involving it so that we can get more trending coming through that is more relevant for meetings like this, and for ourselves to see if there's anything that we're missing. If we're getting continual trending, we'd be looking at our control measures to see, have we got everything? And if not, what can we do as a team? And that's why it's really important that it's not just one person that's involved in the investigation, that's cross-functional, and that includes in our risk registers as well, and doing that hazard and risk management is cross-functional so that you get a lot of different opinions on that, because not one person can do that. It's an overview for health and safety.
Any questions from committee members? Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you. Just on the excuse me, would be a health and safety issue. Around the training. Sorry, I have to take a glass of water. We've got these boxes showing the number of workers trained, currently trained, and then the percentage of workers currently trained. What I wasn't sure about is what's the target that we're working to. So I just, am I misinterpreting something, or should we think about adding that?
Just through the chair, the percentages is where we're currently sitting. It doesn't mean that we actually haven't got employees that are sitting and scheduled for training. So we're looking at trying to get 100%, but this isn't a reflection to say that we're not compliant. It just means that we've got this many that have done that need to do that specific training, and that hopefully by next quarter they will have completed that training. But this will be revolving as people go out and come in.
Yeah, and so where we've got percentage of workers, we're meaning people that work in that area that need to be trained.
That require training, yes.
Any other questions?
Comments and questions now that you've done a great overview of the report. So overall, as a health and safety report, it's set up as a good template with lead and lag indicators, as I would expect. The numbers are looking fairly light, I would think, for an organisation of this size and complexity with regards to near miss reporting. And I think we might have spoken about that previously, but rather than getting into not the weeds of the detail, but I have asked kind of management earlier this morning just in relation to a question around independent assurance. I know we've earlier had a conversation about budget constraints, and a difficult, challenging year that we're about to go through, but health, safety and wellbeing is something that we can never get round to, or never, it can never be jeopardised against anything else. So I just want to make sure that we have had some independent assurance. I think I heard that we had done the plus 365. No, what is it? Basically the work safe independence back in 2019, I think it was. But my recommendation would be that in the next 12 months, we just have a consideration of some independent assurance that looks at our overall health and safety system, and that would be looking at for me personally, would be health and safety governance, critical risks, contractor management. And when I say contractor management, I don't just mean onboarding, I actually mean contractor management for the life cycle of the contractor, and then also our wellbeing, psychosocial kind of risk. So maybe something to think about in the next 12 months around how do we get that independent assurance so that as a governor, we're getting the level of comfort that we are meeting our obligations under the Act.
Through the chair, that's in our plan.
Yeah.
For the coming year.
And just one weeds question, apologies. So on page 26, sorry, I'm in the PDF file, which is the 3 medical events. So first aid being, normally first aid event being something that's normally on site, you know, we can kind of fix that on site with a, you know, whether it's medicine or bandage or first aid. MTI for me normally, well, I think the WorkSafe definition is actually off-site medical treatment. So the 3 bullet points here, were they MTIs or were they first aid?
Medical treatment.
Oh, they were medical
Yes.
treatment off-site. Okay.
So all the, sorry, through the chair.
Yeah.
Yes, they're all medical off-site treatments.
Okay. So maybe just consideration that if it is an MTI going forward, just what would be great to have, even if it's just a little dash going, if there's any lessons learnt. So there might not be from these scenarios, but you know, some MTIs there is going to be a lessons learned, isn't there? So just maybe close that loop on MTIs. First day worry about, but MTIs, let's just close the loop and make sure that is there anything we need to change? Do we need to go back and update our risk register? Do we need to change, you know, working protocols or the way we do things? But yeah, great start, lots to be done, and I look forward to seeing what 2025 brings, because again, we're just going to continuously get better and better. So thank you.
Councillor Butler.
Thanks, I'm happy to move. But I'd also like to endorse what's just been said. I think that closing the loop's really important. And my experience of in health of investigating events is that the loop does get closed with what lessons we have learned and how we're going to do things differently. So I've always had that in mind with this, and I'm really pleased that it's, you know, that we're constructing this system, and I just endorse that we really need to concentrate, because we don't want to be just having the same thing happen again and again, and we need to show you know, how we've changed, what interventions we've made in order to minimise the risk of things happening again. So, agree. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Butler. Before I look for a seconder, of a couple of comments there, that near miss reporting, I think, is really important to get the culture of near misses, because those are situations where we got away with it this time, but we might not be so lucky next time. But we're really unlucky if we don't learn from the near miss. That's actually not unlucky, it's bad management. So we need to be capturing those, and the levels of near misses for an organisation this size. Either everyone is incredibly careful, or we've got under-reporting. Another council I was at this week, much smaller than this one, had far higher levels of near misses noted, and we were getting some level of analysis of the lessons being learnt from that, and what changes have been made to the process as a result of someone saying, crikey, that could have gone wrong, but it didn't. So what do we need to do? What's the lesson learned? And that's about making sure that our staff and everyone goes home at least in as good a nick as they arrived at work. And that's the essence of health and safety to me. So capturing those. The other interesting one on the wellbeing, and I don't know whether the information's available, but other councils I've noted getting a sort of an annual report with some analysis of the EAP referrals, so we can understand the difference between home issues that are perhaps coming to work and work issues which may be being taken home, and what we can learn from that, and some analysis of the areas. And yeah, I know the information's all confidential, but I also know that they generate a periodic report. I'm not sure its frequency, but it's 6 monthly or annually, and that can give some really interesting insights to the governance group about where we might need to have some focuses. So I'm wondering if that could be put into your thinking, or whether it's already there somewhere.
Through the chair, just to respond to that, I think I just need to make it clear that under our health and safety department, wellbeing isn't a part of that. Wellbeing belongs to people and wellbeing, but we will work with people and wellbeing, and we will incorporate a wellbeing aspect to the health and safety report when it's presented at the next audit meeting. So I just wanted noted.
Sorry, I looked at the title of the report, which was Health, Safety and Wellbeing Report.
Yes,
So
because,
it would be good if we can bring that aspect through, because in a professional services organisation, a large chunk of this organisation is professional services, processing consents, their finance teams, their admin, their administration. Often one of their major risks is actually stress, and the general well-being. Not saying that there are not well-being issues in the people in the field that are sort of more doing that, and it's often underreported. I see in organisations regularly that you get health and safety report and no one's thinking about the top 2 inches and the situation people are and what they feel and how they're feeling as a result of their work environment. So to me, that's, it's easy to focus on the cuts, the breaks, the falls, the sprains, the injuries, but it's not quite so easy to focus on the potential injuries to the mental health sector. So to me, that's really important. That's there, Councillor McKenzie.
I just wonder, Leonie, if it's worth mentioning the council's recent engagement survey results, because I mean, I think I haven't got the information in front of me, but I think that certainly speaks to wellbeing, but because it's not reported through into this committee.
Through the chair, actually, it didn't come through strongly. 78% of our staff said it's a great place to work, which is way higher than local government average. We didn't ask specific questions around stress, so we probably didn't get a bit of a feel for that. But we mostly got pretty positive results. Look, people put in a huge amount of work and extra hours and goodwill. I'm seeing a lot of stress right now. And as I said, didn't come through that in our team results. Joanna's in the room. There wasn't any specific question around stress, was there? Yeah. Sorry about that, but maybe that's my. And you've got to come to the next. But anyway.
Apologies. So there's nothing specific asking about stress as such, but there are questions that are wellbeing related that we can pull a theme from the survey. And I've looked at those recently, and they all actually scored very highly in positive green areas of the survey. But we can bring that information to the next committee if it would be of value.
Just for the chair, types of questions are asked of things like, can I be myself at work? Do I feel comfortable being who I am? Those are types of things are also that psychosocial as well. So there is quite a theme, but they're not specific things, not purely asking, do you feel that, I did talk a little bit, was there one around workload? There were some comments around workload. There were some comments, but that didn't say the word stress.
And through the chair, I'll just respond to those comments as well. So both of the functions that we're talking about, health and safety and people and wellbeing, report through to me. So I can give members the assurance that there is an awful lot which we are doing in our wellbeing sphere, and that there's a lot of actions that we've taken over the last 12 months and longer to focus on the responsibilities that we've got to our people and their wellbeing. What we haven't done thus far with this committee is include those in a single report. So we'll make that our focus for the February report, if that's when we next hold an ARC meeting. But I can absolutely assure members that we are taking the wellbeing of our people extremely seriously.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from committee members? We have a resolution on the screen. You've moved it. Do we have a seconder? Annalisa. Any last comments? All those in favour? Against, if any? No abstentions are noted. Carried. Thank you, everyone. I think that was a good discussion. Moving on through to 6.4, Just looking at the agenda, I've got it's 6.5. Okay, it's, yes. 6.4 in the papers and 6.5 on my worksheet. Oh, we did two. Okay, so page 52 is 6.5.
The risk and assurance policy is what I'd like to talk to first, if that's what's on the agenda.
Thank you. You can direct us to the right place on the agenda.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. So this is the risk and assurance policy. This sets out the principles for risk management and internal audit at council. It's really a sort of an underlying sort of framework, well, not framework, strong word, set of principles which directs us and how we do risk management and internal audit. But it's the foundation, I guess, and there will be, so obviously a risk management framework which sits beside this, and there'll be an internal audit charter and framework as well. So this policy is, I think, fairly simple. It's just setting the stage, and it's just important to have in place to make sure that everything we do comes out of this. So happy to have your comments.
Any comments, questions from members? Annalisa? Microphone.
Get into the right page. No, once again, great work. I like to have risk management policies that are quite clean and crisp and simple also, because it's your framework that's actually the how-to document. What did I do? I did have one question. I think it was it might have been the definitions of internal auditor as a title, and then internal audit team as a function. I'm looking at or the risk and assurance advisor, and then so my question, and it is just food for thought at this stage. So when we get to having a greater internal audit function, whether that's I think it was either co-sourced or it's in-house, just having a think about, it's almost what your role is. And my ultimate high level question is, do you consider yourself second line or third line? And for the rest in the room, Amy knows exactly what I'm talking about, but the 3 lines of defence model is, it's how we monitor and manage risk. So first line is our policies, procedures, and then second line is kind of maybe some internal reviews, and then third line is what we normally consider independent. And independent is normally someone outside of the organisation, like the report that we've got further in the agenda pack, or an internal audit team may consider themselves independent. But if that person is independent, then you sometimes have to think about the structure of that person and their team, and whether they potentially have a dotted line through to Mr. Chair, or they do have some form of, so maybe just, it was only a word in here, but just think that word actually means quite a bit. Like, are you, is Amy and her team of many minions, which I know there are not, but are you independent or are you not independent? And so that will then trigger whether you co-source or you're in-house, or so nothing you have to solve now, but it's more just food for thought around.
Through the chair, I'll just respond quickly. So in the risk framework, we talk about the 3 lines model, and with the concept that the assurance team are in the 3rd line, so they sit outside, and so that in terms of audit, etc., if they've got the capacity and the capability, they would do the internal auditing, depending on the level and extent of it, or if it's a major piece of work, then they would look at sourcing that externally.
That's great. So if that is, then just make sure that Amy is set up to succeed, and that means that she has the superpower almost to do exactly what she wants and go anywhere and request, no matter of rank or level of, if she's 3rd line, then she needs that ability to do that.
And the reporting line coming from that should initially be internal, but she should have documented the ability to go to the independents probably presumably myself as chair in first instance, but if I was not available for any reason to our other independent, and it's documented in there and the chance of ever needing it, I would hope is absolutely minimal. But it's handy to have it there just in case, for instance, conflict of interest situations turn up, or feeling like internal pressures. And all the time I've been involved, I can only ever think of once where that's happened. And that was actually because the organisation concerned, the internal audit had suspicion of inappropriate expenditure happening at a very senior level. As it turned out, there was a very good explanation, but they wanted some guidance outside the loop. So I think that is actually important to have there in there, and it is a dotted line. It's certainly not a solid one. Excellent. Any other comments from members on paper 6.5? If not, we've got the resolutions and a recommendation. So the recommendation is that the policy document is recommended to council for approval, because this is a council policy. You're happy to move all three? No one has a desire to take these in parts? I'll look for a seconder on that basis. Annalisa, no further discussion? If not, all those in favour?
Aye.
Against, if any? And no abstentions noted, carried. Moving back to 6.4, which I think is about page 30, if I'm right. We have a paper here, the Risk and Assurance Report, and the same two kind people from the team there, from our valued team, are at the table if you'd like to just talk us through the key points.
Thank you. And just as a note, the reason I wanted the other one first and then this one is because at the last council meeting we discussed having more of the risk report in the public forum, and so I wanted to enable the report to be read and then to have some attachments in the confidential to allow for discussion in both. So that's why I wanted this order. So thank you for adjusting to that. So within my report, a quick summary is we have recently done some work in Fraud Awareness Week. We have an open action from Audit New Zealand around the training for staff, and so we took this opportunity to do some work in that space and share some information with staff. There's still work to be done to complete that action, but it's a starting point for us. We've got a couple audits which are underway, one through the IOAG and one internal one, which Deirdre's leading, and we've got a couple audits, the LIMS review and the procure to pay review, which we are working hard on achieving some of those recommendations, and we expect to report to you in the new year about those. I was also asked for a risk appetite statement implementation plan, which was just a few points about how we were going to look at making sure we implemented that. And so I've done a few things like making it available on the intranet and adding it to our risk framework. I'm going to start looking at reflecting that in some of the reporting, which I haven't done this quarter, but going forward I will look to do that. And I'm going to start talking more about it with SLG members as I meet with them on a regular basis. The quarterly risk report is attached. There's a bit more focus in this one on some of the operational risks and including those. Some of the key things to note are that we have escalated the financial strategic risk, and there are a number of risks in the space of finances associated with our resources and our ability to deliver and the well-being of staff and the workloads and things like that. There's quite a few risks in that space. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. And just perhaps before questions, I've been alerted that Yvonne, our external audit assigned person that heads up the audit has joined us, and just welcome Yvonne, and the small print at the other end of the room with the glasses I've got on. I had not picked up on that, so welcome, and feel free to participate as you see fit, but you'll be there predominantly for your papers, which are in public excluded, and we're relatively close to moving to that part of the agenda.
Thank you.
In the meantime,
hello everyone.
Thank you. In the meantime, any questions on the paper 6.4? Annalisa.
You're never going to get a pass a risk report without me making some comments. But yeah, great work, Amy, and we're on a journey. This is going to get just better and better. So a couple of things. Given the earlier corridor around our current financial position that we are in, I would have thought that the financial risk, although we have moved the likelihood to where we think it should be based on current state today, I did have a question, or I guess a challenge for the finance team to consider, is where the actual impact is sitting. Because when you look at the impact of that risk, I would suggest that I'm happy for the finance team to obviously push back on this, but I think it is financial insufficient funds to deliver services and functions required by legislation, strategy, or business plan. So to me, I would think on our heat map that should probably be in the red as at today, with hopefully coming back to us in 3 months' time after all that work that we're going to do, and it's gone back. But I think the corridor that we had, pretty much 45 minutes ago, I would say that, anyway, just something to consider, because I can't tell you where the risk should be sitting. It's your risk, not my risk, but I was surprised not to see that sitting in red.
Thank you, Annalisa. You took the words right out of my mouth. I was thinking that a move like a knight on the chessboard might have been appropriate, sort of up and to the right at this stage. But I agree with you. By the next meeting, of everything that we heard in the earlier discussions that we had, that might well then be dynamically readjusted downwards, because these things are dynamic. But we have Mike at the table, and I'd value his input. He's got decades of experience in these things, and there's not much in local government, and certainly in Tasman, that you haven't seen before.
The current financial situation is a concern. There is obviously work going on to try and address the worst or the biggest challenges that we've actually got. And as Matt said earlier in the meeting, there's a sort of a short, medium and long-term response required. And in my view, there's an underlying adjustment that's needed for us to remain financially resilient. So I was comfortable with the move, or at least with the setting on this report. However, if we were unable to arrive at a plan to address the current issue, then I would see that moving up in terms of the outcomes. This stage, it's relatively early. It's been flagged early, and we've got a plan to create a plan, if you like, to address it. So I was comfortable with the setting. If we got to the next Audit and Risk Committee meeting and we'd made no substantive progress, and we're at, shall we say, we're at a stalemate over how to move forward, then I would be raising that risk.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just to add to the sentiments that Mike's just echoed, I think we looked at this as being a residual heat map, so there's an clear expectation that we're going to manage and mitigate some of the risks that we face, and also the risk points to legislative strategy and business plan. And did we feel that we had a threat to legislative requirements, then I would certainly be inclined to push that more towards the extreme end in terms of the outcomes. So the threat at the moment is to strategy and business plan issues, and that we expect to have some mitigation in place.
So at risk of being technical, and Amy's going to go, you're going to go here, and I'm going to go here for her, because she knows exactly what I'm about to say. is that I think you've got the likelihood and the impact round the wrong way then. So maybe today, maybe the likelihood is still where it should be, because, and maybe in a month's time, if we don't think we're going to get there, we need to shift that likelihood. But the impact will always be the same. Won't it? You know, take it away, and we don't need to have a debate now for an hour and chew up the agenda talking about, and Amy can probably support you with that, but I think it's this risk is we put a whole lot of work in to mitigate the likelihood of the risk, not the impact, because the impact will be the impact. But anyway, take that offline without me taking up too much more time on that. A couple of other things a couple of questions I had. Great to see that we, and even better that we're taking a positive view on the OAG work. We're not looking at that and going, oh, another audit by OAG, you know, because it will take time, but I actually think it's great that we've been selected for that. I did have a question around, will we be able to use the output of that for our risks and the assessment of our risks? So we obviously, Amy, have a risk register that includes a whole lot of these flood risks. All the work that comes out of OAG give us a level of certainty, or from my perspective as a governor, a level of confidence on how well those risks are being or not being mitigated. When you look at the scope of what OAG.
Rob, welcome. Thank you. Kia ora. Through the chair, potentially would be the short answer. What we're really hoping from the OAG is to essentially establish our position now. Are we doing our job properly? Are we considering those risks? And then we'll be able to essentially use it as a benchmark for the future. They're not specifically focused on Tasman. They're looking at councils, and we're an example of a small council, small rating base. But the findings they give will be relevant to us. So particularly at the moment, you're aware of Environment Bay of Plenty potentially facing a legal challenge around whether they did their job properly. So we'll be using that information to come back and hopefully address these items that we have, but potentially also find a few more for us. Some of the ones around the resiliency of our network, so to be able to withstand loss from a data point of view. So we're actually really interested in the wider findings.
Last one, just the fraud awareness week. So great work here. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this last time, but in relation to a really good fraud program of work, you know, we always talk about what are we doing to detect, what are we doing to prevent fraud, what are we doing to detect, i.e. find it, and then how well are we equipped to be able to respond. So if there is a fraud allegation at 4 p.m. on a Friday, does everyone in the organisation know who the fraud control officer is, who the person is that they go and talk to, and we manage it in a discreet, in a way that, you know, complies with our protected disclosures and all that kind of thing. So often, even in a really robust organisation, we can be pretty good at having some good internal controls around, you know, prevention and detection with delegations and system controls. But I always like to ask the question on what are we doing to find it, because it will be there. You know, over a period of time, it will be there. So I know, you know, resources and time and capacity and a whole lot of other stuff going on, but what are we doing to find it? And that's in the kind of way of, I say that's around data analytics, you know, and I know that the finance team do a little bit in there, but, you know, it has to be broader than that. It can't just be around our payable data, you know, once a quarter. It has to be around understanding how could fraud happen in our organisation and what are we doing to find it. And that's around conflicts of interest, kickbacks and bribery and all that kind of stuff, because we should always be looking for it. And a lot of people don't really like to talk about the F word, but good practices, we should be looking for it because it will be there, unfortunately, especially, you know, when you think about the current cost of living crisis. And I think I've done 5 fraud investigations this year. I'm doing one at the moment, and it was all with, you know, trusted employees who've been with the organisation for a very long time. So it's 5 this year, and I probably only did 1 or 2 last year. So it shows you that cost of living crisis and the added pressure that's being put on people to take the chance. But yeah, great report, and yeah, thank you.
Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you. Just 2 matters. Just the procure to pay review. Did we get that at a previous meeting, or?
Yes, it is. I think it's actually from 2023.
Oh,
I think so. It's been there a while, but we've had a vacant role in that space, and so now Doug is in that space, and he's putting in some, developing some procedures and some in the function. So what will happen is next year he'll come and present to you what he's doing in that space. It's not exactly, it's covering the recommendations, but not one by one. It's like a big piece of work to cover a lot of recommendations.
okay. No, that's good. And I did see that we were getting more information in May. I just wanted to make a comment on the OAG work, and just to sort of stress how important it is for the organisation's reputation to make sure that when that piece of work is completed by the OAG, and I realise it's covering more than just Tasman, but there will be a whole suite of recommendations. The worst thing you can do is actually just to put the report in your bottom drawer and not actually think about what those recommendations mean for Tasman, assign a person who's accountable for actually picking up on that recommendation, and then include in your reporting back to this committee, because it's really a super bad look if you can't close the loop.
Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Yeah, just looking for some clarification about the risks that climate change bring, and that we have. I mean, this may have been a conscious decision or deliberate decision that the risks from climate change are incorporated into into the categories already, but it does raise the question in my mind that it's not visible. It's actually, and I do think that given the work that council has committed to, that I think that it probably deserves to be visible. In our long-term plan, we did decide that climate change work would be for adaptation and reducing emissions would be kind of incorporated into the other activity management plans, but we do actually have it identified as a separate thing in our long-term plan. So to me, I'd just like to have a response as to why we're not actually itemising climate change as a separate risk. There may be a very good reason for it.
Through the chair. So within the strategic risk, we incorporated climate change within the disaster event risk. So that was talking about not only a short-term event, but long-term events. In terms of, we don't have any listed within the operational risks related to climate change. And while I have had meetings with Barbara, we're still working towards what those risks look like. And I'm very happy to meet with her more in the next while to ensure that we've got risks included so that they're visible in my reporting.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Any other comments before I've got a few to put in? Wow, what a good discussion about this. It is, we had Fraud Awareness Week, which is sponsored by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners globally, of which I happen to be a member of, and president of the local chapter on the national board. So it's an area that's very close to my heart. I think it's worthwhile consideration of doing a fraud framework assessment and looking through council as to where are the most likely places, given the nature of our operations and everything else, that fraud might occur. and actually have an understanding and look into all the corners. I support all the comments that the economic position we're in, it causes reasonable people to start thinking about doing unreasonable things and just under pressure. And there's all sorts of pressures that we don't know about within our staff and their family situations that might be bringing at-home pressures into the work environment. There could be pressures because of redundancies of a partner and various other economic pressures being put on. And those sort of things can cause people to start thinking about. So what can we do? We can publicise widely in the organisation that we do have an active anti-fraud and fraud detection program in place. It would be useful to have a report coming into PX at a future meeting on what actual steps are we taking to go through and detect and look for fraud in our processes, along with the controls. How do we know the controls are effective? And just have a bit of a brainstorm there. So I think that's particularly important at the moment, because I too have got an appointment in the District Court in Invercargill as an expert witness for a fraud case, which is scheduled, I think it's March next year, for an interesting allegation where I'm acting as an expert witness. So it is out there, and I'm certainly seeing an uptick in activity, same as Annalise has seen. With regard to the OAG flood protection audit, I'm really keen on this one. Some of you will know that I sit on a regional council as well, and watching with interest the Bay of Plenty situation. And whilst being a unitary authority, we have dual responsibilities. So wondering if coming out of this, what is the appropriate ARC involvement in this? Because I see from a reputational risk, potentially a liability risk, us getting it wrong and not having best practice in place, given the increased frequency of 1 in 100 years. I must be about 300 by this stage, and that's only in the last 5 years. These events are happening more often. And then with other climate change factors, we're getting more intense storms. I've just had a lecture from my brother-in-law, who's an atmospheric physicist, recently in the last couple of weeks, and we can expect far more extreme storms happening, simply because the warmer weather's coming down, they hold more water, and they're going to hit us. So he said, just expect what you're seeing to become quite a regular event, and discount the 1 in 100 year storm concept that can actually send you the wrong messages. So yeah. And this particular person was the keynote speaker at the World Atmospheric Physics Conference a few years ago, so he sort of knows what he's doing. So I did take a bit of notice. So all these things I think are good, and we need to make sure we're on board. Any further comments before I move to the resolution? I think we need the next the other resolution up, Gavin. Thank you. Councillor Butler.
Thank you. Yes, and thanks for raising the flood audit. And it was, I think, it was fortuitous that Tasman was chosen to do this, because it's going to be a benefit to us, and certainly our management have said that's good. Just from what I know about this rivers management, is that we do intersect with landowners, private landowners, and we are quite constrained as to what private landowners will actually are prepared to do to work in partnership. And you know, private landowners have said, well, you know, they want to use as much of the land as they possibly can, whereas, you know, one of the remedies or the solutions to this increase in rainfall is to actually let rivers take a bit more room. So this is, I see this as a bit of a risk actually to council, that that we come up against this situation, and other than just working with landowners and trying to educate them and get them to understand we can't make landowners actually have less barriers on the sides of the rivers where they actually own the land. So I would just highlight that situation that we don't have control over everything in this space.
Thank you, and certainly not the weather gods and what they throw at us. It's we're very much in reactionary mode and using best information available. So I really will value, and we'll look forward, Rob, to hearing back on this one and working out what, if any, involvement this committee needs to have from a risk management point of view, rather than an operational point of view.
If it was okay through the chair, what I can say already from the OAG interaction is it was really positive, and the questions they're asking it's not like a normal OAG inquiry. We kind of, when we first got the letter, we thought, oh no, what have we done wrong? But it's actually a very positive engagement, and it's gone right from political level right down to staff level, community engagement, the technical specialists. So it's looking at the whole process. And from our point of view, it should hopefully assist us with that discussion with the government around the tranche 2 funding and looking at other avenues for funding, which has been very positive in this district. We've done particularly well. So it's actually a really positive approach. And as the chair mentioned, we will be reporting back on this because flooding is our highest risk. And so it's a really good opportunity to readdress that.
Thank you. Any last comments before I look for a mover and seconder? We have the resolution up on the screen. Councillor McKenzie, you're happy to move? Annalisa, you're happy to second? All those in favour? Against, if any? And noted there are no abstentions, carried. It's now time for us to move into